Hello and welcome everyone to another installment of my Procreate for Beginners series. In this video we are going to be talking about transformations. And if you don't already know, this video is part of a series. I have a few other videos that have already come out before this, and I have a few that will come out afterwards as well. All of those videos will be available in my Procreate and Digital Art playlist that will be linked here and also in the description. So let's get started with transformations. Alright, so I have, if you've seen my selections video, you see something kind of familiar here. That's because I'm doing them both the same day. And they're kind of related, so I wanted to do that. So, if you haven't seen my selections video, we're going to go over a little bit about it, but I went over everything you need to know about selections in that video, so you're probably going to want to go watch that if you haven't. But basically, you have to select something before you can transform it. So you don't necessarily need the selections tool to do that. You could select the layer, like I showed you in the selections video. So you go to a layer and you select a layer. So you see the whole layer is selected. You can do that. And you see that popped up with the selections tool. You can also, if you just hit the transform button, which is this one, it will automatically pick everything on the layer. So if you want to do something to the whole layer, everything that's on the layer, you don't have to select anything first. However, if you did want to only do part of the layer, part of whatever's on the layer, you'd have to select it first with the selections tool that I went through in the other video. So right now I'm just going to show you the entire thing, just hitting the transform tool. You see, first of all, this box appeared around your whatever's on the layer. It will just kind of put a box around it and fit as much of whatever's in there as possible in the box. And this popped up, this little thing down here. So we'll talk about all these in a second. I'm going to go over this first. So you have this box around here. First thing is this green node here. If you hold it down and you start rotating the selection around, that's how you would change the angle of something. Now if you notice, it rotates in 15-degree increments automatically here. But if you click on, without holding, you click on the green thing there, it'll come up with this, and you can do whatever angle you want on here. You don't have to do 15, you could do less than 15 or more than 15, and if you hit this plus or minus, it'll take it the other way. So it's rotating at 5 degrees below the baseline here, and if you make it positive, it's going above the baseline. And then you can just hit the AC and it'll clear it back to 0, or you can hit 0. And then just click off of it and it'll go away. This yellow one down here is kind of similar, except what you're doing is you're changing the box angle. And depending on what you're trying to do with this, you may want to do that. It's kind of hard to show without really doing something practical. But that'll change the bounding box around it. Now you notice there's all these blue nodes around here. You can grab any of those and move this around. And I'll just show you, kind of get into what we're going to talk about down here. So uniform is selected automatically. That means that it's keeping the proportions of this box uniform if you start making changes. So you notice when the corner it does that anyway, but if you try to do one of these here, you're moving it to the right, but it's also making the vertical larger, both top and bottom, because it's keeping the proportions the same. So if you're moving this to the right, it's also going to make it bigger this way. That's because uniform is on. If you change it to freeform, you can make changes without keeping the proportions intact. So you can move this, if you want to make it wider without making it taller, you can do that. And same if you want to make it taller without making it wider, you can do that there. You can also undo with the 2 fingers from the gestures video. And another thing you can do, so you can actually kind of, if you click somewhere like sort of towards the center of whatever selected, and you hold it down, you can move it around. And I'll talk about what that line is in a minute. But you can move it around like that. And you can also use your finger to do that. And you can also, once it's selected like this, you can, with the bounding box, you can nudge it in different directions. So you can see how it's moving ever so slightly every time I tap. Might be kind of hard to see, but it is moving ever so slightly every time I tap. And you can do that in any direction. You can do it towards the right here. I kind of dragged there, but see how I'm tapping? And it's moving ever so slightly to the right corner, the top right corner there. You can do that for more finer adjustments. You can also click on any of these nodes and put in a specific dimension that you want. And it's on Freeform now, so if you were to change this, let's say 1100, it's going to make it smaller, but it's not going to make it taller because that didn't change because we're on Freeform. But if we did uniform, and we tried to do this, it's going to change both, because this is going to change because it's uniform proportions. Hope that explains that. So, but you can change it like directly the exact amount you want. All right, so you can also, I'm going to come back to snapping. That's on right now. That's fine. You can flip whatever is in that box selected. You can flip horizontally and vertically. And then you can rotate the entire thing 45 very easily, rather than 15 with the node. You can fit it to the canvas, which is going to fit it to basically, like, depends on the size of your canvas and the size of your box, bounding box. But it's going to fit it, as much as it can. So it was always kind of longer than it was high. So it's going to make sure that this is the exact same height. So it's going to go a little off the canvas. If you're working with a square canvas and a square box, it wouldn't do that. But that's something you do. Also, I didn't tell you this, but you can also squeeze, pinch with fingers, and then you can, rotate it that way as well. But you can move your fingers in and out in a pinching motion, or whatever the inverse of pinching is, expanding, I don't know, with your fingers to also transform, it. So those are that. Bicubic, this, if you click on this, there's 3 different things here. It's actually interpolation. This is really complicated. Honestly, I don't really do much with this myself. It has to do with, and it's not going to really affect text at all because text is vector. Maybe after you rasterize it, it would. But it's because I told you raster is Procreate is a raster program, and raster it deals with pixels rather than like paths, which is vector. Paths between 2 points or more points actually. With pixels, once you start making something bigger, you're going to lose some of the quality of whatever you've drawn. So once you start making it bigger, it kind of loses some of the pixels along the way, because like you end up with like different number of pixels the bigger you get. So it kind of has to guess where it needs to put the color in, basically. So nearest neighbor it takes like the information from the pixel that you originally drew on and its nearest neighbors. And when you make it bigger, it'll do kind of the same thing as you make it bigger. which it'll give you like a not as pixelated sort of thing as you make it bigger, but it's going to kind of not be, eventually it's not going to be exactly the same as you drew it. Like it's going to look a little jagged and weird because it's hard to explain, basically. The difference is, and then bilinear is it takes the pixel you have and then it takes like the direct four around it. So like one to the left, one to the right, one to the bottom, and one to the top. And judges based on that. And then as you make it bigger, like it does the same kind of thing that way. So sometimes that gives a little bit more of a smoother look, but it's going to be a little pixelated. And then Bicubic is it basically takes a bigger look, like it takes two from the left and right and top and bottom, like a 4x4 grid around the point that you're talking about, and it'll give you another like smoother kind of thing as you're making it bigger, but then it's not going to really look like it's supposed to anymore either. So basically, this is how I understand it. Bilinear is basically the best of both worlds, and it's the one I usually keep it on. So I don't really use that much, so you may want to maybe find a better explanation of that somewhere else. I'm sorry, I can't really explain it very well. Maybe later on, if I have like a project I can do that incorporates that, we'll talk about it a little more. But usually I leave it on bilinear. So that's that. Did I talk about reset? No, I don't think so. So as you're making all these changes to your transform, whatever you're doing, you can reset it to its original thing without going back out to the transform, like without deselecting transform and without taking this menu away. Kind of the same with the selection when we did the clear on selection. You can reset it to its original thing without going out and then undoing. But just to show you, or just to warn you, once you do go out and you deselect this and you go out, it's gonna not remember all of your steps that you just did. So if you were trying to undo to do something that you went too far and you wanted to undo, let's say you wanted that for some reason, you wouldn't be able to do that. Let's take it back to where it was. Are we not working? I guess it's there. Okay. Once, I'll just show you, once you get out here, if you hit undo, it's not going to go through all those things. Like we're going back to the selection stuff that I was doing before I started this video. So it's not going to remember all the little steps once you come out of there, basically. So in case you want to redo something you did, don't go out of the transformation menu until you're sure. But anyway, let's go back in. So yeah, we took care of all those. Snapping we'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to go to distort. So what that does is you can distort whatever you have selected. Right now it's text. If you move any of these nodes, it's going to give you kind of an angled look. So, it's kind of a way to make things a little 3D. And especially if you were working with that perspective grid that we were talking about, you could do something like that. Also, this is kind of like the inverse of like Star Wars text. But if you were to go like this, you could do something like that, if that's the look you were going for. But anyway, this is kind of to do that kind of stuff. And you can, pick the little nodes and decide what you want to do with it. but that is distort. Now, if you go to warp, it's a little more complicated. You can grab all these little nodes and warp things. So it's not really making it an angle, it's kind of stretching everything out. So if you're trying to fit into a certain shape or whatever. Now with this, there's this thing called advanced mesh over here, which will give you more nodes on your thing. I'm going to turn it off real quick because I want to show you the difference. So if you're going to pick one of these middle things, you could do that here. But you see it's a little bit, like it grabs a lot of things with it when you do that. But if you hit advanced mesh, you see we have these little nodes here, and it won't grab it as much with these little nodes, and you'll be able to make kind of finer adjustments. And same with these and the ones on the end too. You can grab all these when you don't have it on, but it's going to make it, it's going to grab it a lot. It's going to kind of pull everything. Whereas if you put advanced on, it's only going to pull a little bit. So that's that. I'm going to reset. Why don't I just do that? Okay. So snapping, if you go here, you notice there's magnetics, snapping, distance, and velocity. I'll be honest with you, I don't really change this distance and velocity ever. It's kind of more complicated than I ever deal with. Magnetics and snapping are, if you have them both off, basically you can move this anywhere and you don't have any guide to where things are. And if you have them on, let's put on snapping for one, it kind of comes up with this little grid which will show you like the center line horizontally and vertically. So you can, like this would be considered to be exactly in the center of the canvas because I had it both on the vertical lines and the horizontal lines. I had it snapped to both. And it kind of holds it there a little more than if you were to just kind of run it around. And then magnetics is a little more complicated. Like you see this blue thing comes up because it shows you like how far off you are from that. And it shows you, okay, you're keeping this on the same line that you were before. But if it starts going like, the line starts going haywire like that, it's not vertical anymore, it tells you that you're off the grid, basically. All right, I duplicated this layer just to kind of show you. I'm now on this layer. If you have snapping on, like it'll show you also like where another thing in another layer is on the canvas that's on, like it's on the selection, the layer is selected, so it's on the canvas, it's visible, is basically what I'm trying to say. But this will help you like line things up to other things, and it'll kind of snap to it, is basically the purpose of snapping. And it'll snap, you see this yellow horizontal line and vertical line that shows up on the entire canvas. That's just to show you that this is like the center. When these nodes hit that line and when these nodes hit that line, you're in the center of the canvas. And it'll kind of snap to that as well. And the magnetics part of it is to show you how far off you are, I guess. I'm going to increase the distance a little and show you what that does. You see how it's kind of snapping? You see how it's kind of snapping to that a little easier with when that's turned on? Higher. Because the threshold is kind of higher now. So it's basically like, in terms of pixels, like it's on 36. So anytime this is within 36 pixels of the guides, it kind of snaps right to it. So if you have it all the way up, it's going to do it even more. So that may get kind of annoying. That's why you want to adjust it. And then velocity. This will activate, every guide that it has, available through snapping and magnetics as you're moving it through the canvas, but if you turn it off or you turn it down, you'd have to be moving a lot slower. See how that's not really showing up because I'm moving too fast? That's what that means. I would just leave it at max. I don't know why I would change it to, personally. So that's what that does, basically. But it's just, these are all guides to keep things where you want them on the canvas, basically. So that's what that all is. And I think that's it for transformations. Okay, so still to come in this series. These aren't necessarily in order, but we're going to take a look at the blend modes, which was something I talked about in the layers video. And I said I'd go through all the blend modes and tell you what they do. Similarly, I'm also going to take you through the brush library, all the brushes that Procreate comes with, and kind of show you the different kinds of brushes there are and what you can do with each of them. And then in the brush studio, we're going to look at that, and that's where you would make your own brushes. So we're going to go through the brush studio itself and go through all the little subcategories there are in there and show you what they do, how you can change different things. And then after we do that, we're going to go and make a few simple brushes together. So that'll be a few videos of its own. And then we are also going to go through the adjustments menu, which is where you can do things like blurring and changing the hue and the tint of a whole layer or anything like that. So we'll go through that in another video. And then we're going to be looking at the animations feature in Procreate and what you can do. And then similarly with the brushes, we're going to make a few simple animations together. So that'll be a few videos of itself. And then there's an etc. category, which is basically everything else I haven't talked about yet. So that's probably going to come last in this series. But then after we're done with all of these deep dives, I'm going to be doing projects that take some of these things together and show you how you can use them together. So after we get through the deep dives, there will be also projects as well. They will all be in the same playlist, Procreate and Digital Art. So make sure you follow that playlist. And I will see you in the next one.